maybe even a little privileged to ask them. Oh, now, what up, good people? What's going on with you? It is another day in the life, and we got to talk. Baby, we got to talk. Thank you to everybody getting ready to log in and get ready for a good conversation on today, because I got some questions. As a matter of fact, you're more than likely looking at my posts and going, what Gerard talking about? What Gerard talking about? And some of you a little bit more curious, and you done already started just basically Googling, baby, Googling, everybody Googling. So I had the opportunity to see some things, to do some things that a lot of folks don't get the opportunity to do, and maybe even a little privileged to ask some questions. So I did. And sometimes I have to ask myself, what you go and do that for, Daryl? What you go and do that for? And when I did it, I got a whole lot more than what I bargained for by asking those questions, and found out that maybe I'm just a little bit like Keith Sweat when I be listening to things and start singing them old songs of something just ain't right. Leslie, I sang that for you, baby. You supposed to have your hands in the air waving right now. Leslie like, oh, no, no. What you say, Smiley? What's going on, Joycelyn? So I'm thinking to myself, Daryl.
All right, so tell us what happened from the beginning.
Should I ask this question, or should I be leaving this alone? And I know y'all going, who the heck are you talking about, Gerard? With a T. And I'm actually talking about a case that was classified as a suicide several years ago by the NOPD. This case, classified as a suicide, was from a young man that's named Seth Donaldson.
I'm not a big texter, so
Seth
I'll let you know whenever we get out. Travis
was a transplant just like me
come pick you up from wherever you are.
from North Carolina that came down here, I guess, with the dreams of milk and honey. What up, Frank Nitty? What's going on, Miss Jones? It ain't Wednesday yet, so you can't do your hump day yet, Miss Jones. Not yet.
Anyways, so he said
So as I am
and he was going to the shop.
reading up and watching special reports,
Yeah, he was there.
which I did,
But from there, we take him back by
I'm finding out something, Robin. I'm finding out something. And what I'm finding out
We were
just ain't adding up. Something wrong.
Just kind of having a good time. I was like, show us around.
Something wrong.
Been here for, I guess, half a year.
So I decided that this morning I was going to play an investigation piece that was actually put together by Channel 4.
Back to the apartment, and everything was fine.
And I said, let me before I really take this on, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing now. I have contacted
Trying to get a hold on him. He was
some
beating the
folks.
shit out of him, and I was trying to
And I'm going to tell you exactly
calling mom and
what's going to happen today.
hold you
Okay.
up, take care of you, I'll make sure you're
But I want to play Katie Moore's question, because Katie did a 3-part series.
exercise with him. I tried to do meditation with him, just trying everything I knew.
Katie Moore is from Channel 4,
Down, and he was just
and I'm going to use her series to give you some insight on things that I see with this case that made me go,
he's okay.
Something wrong.
laying on the bed. I was like, "Are you okay?" He just like
Something wrong.
just runs and like does it.
So I said, play it.
It was so quick, like I don't even.
Let my audience see
so
it.
Y'all got to the hotel when y'all came in.
Let them determine
right then and there. And then
about this story, what you think.
He just started flipping out.
So for
And
no
then
reason,
what we'll
nothing
do
happened.
is
No
move from there to
He
see
didn't
if,
say
you
anything
know,
wrong. Like he just started freaking out. He just
if this is
started
something that
calling me mom,
everybody
and
will be
that's
like,
when I
yeah,
like
G, you need to go
noticed.
ahead on and do this story. Because something just ain't right.
Like he was calling me mom and him dad.
What did he first say when he started?
This young man is from North Carolina, I tell y'all that. Came down here
Or just like
with the dreams of milk and honey. Something went wrong. And I do think that before we sit up here and be judgmental, I need to let you know the drugs are involved.
The first, like, screaming episodes and shit.
And so
We got back into the hotel.
don't be judgmental when we just say drugs involved, G. How you gonna do that story when he tripping?
Just having it.
All right? So this young man's name is Seth Donaldson. Did Seth Donaldson commit suicide,
attempted suicide.
or is his parents right in their assumption that something else happened?
Attempted that by jumping off
Because they're still fighting.
state and survived.
Seth Donaldson's parents from Hendersonville, North Carolina,
Kind of maybe
down here 5 and 6, 7 times, meeting with folks, trying to make sure that their son's justice
he didn't even
will come out.
disclaim
All right?
that he
So
was
here we
on
go. I
anything.
want you to take a look at the story. You tell me what you think, and then we'll move from there. All right, here we
That's
go.
why I didn't.
Someone's died.
This is a day when we keep two things
Someone's got a bloody nose.
together that usually don't go together,
Something happened.
and that's called mourning and hope.
How long were y'all in the room before it started? 29. That's what it is right now.
And then we stepped to some arguing, and that's when I heard the whole crashing down and like sound the whole side of the building just completely collapsed.
So you had 51 points that you felt
51.
were mishandled by police.
Is it fun?
And at what point did y'all do? Is that his cell phone? Yeah. At what point did y'all start? Like,
There's no part of me that thinks that he would want to commit suicide.
Yeah, she.
Why do I have to come down here and tell you to do your job?
He was being out of hand.
Like, I've never been through this before, but, but this certainly doesn't sound normal.
Story time.
Did that, I think he like realized he lashed out and then was kind of freaking out inside because he was gonna think he was gonna do something to him. And I told him, I was like, Fahad's not gonna touch you, and I'm gonna make sure he doesn't, but you need to apologize. And he was like, no, like screaming.
Hey, I'm Scott.
Hey, nice to meet you. I first met Scott in April on a wretched, gray, miserable day. It just kept raining and raining, flooding.
I'm not New Orleans naive. These big cities, they're great until something bad happens. And something bad happens. You get a vision of the underside of what just infuriates people about it.
The Donaldsons live in Hendersonville, North Carolina. This is Scott's third trip to meet with New Orleans police, the FBI, and the independent police monitor to get a full investigation into Seth's death.
Why do I have to come down here and tell you to do your job?
The Orleans Parish coroner ruled Seth's death a suicide, but the NOPD is taking the unusual step of taking another look at the case. Seth was with two friends from high school from back home in North Carolina the night that he died. We're calling them John and Kelly. Those aren't their real names because they're witnesses to a crime, not criminal suspects. Here's what happened. At 10:11 p.m., Seth took this picture with a close family friend while working at Gree Restaurant. Shortly after, he spoke with Amy on the phone about his future.
He started his countdown 20 more days till I come home.
1:23 a.m. Seth gets a text from John, a high school friend from North Carolina, saying, "I'm waiting outside at the Chop Yard bar." At approximately 2 a.m., Seth sends a picture to another North Carolina friend who asked not to be identified.
The last thing that he sent to me on Snapchat was a picture of him taking a tab of acid, and I knew that he had never really done that.
3:10 a.m. John takes this video. Approximately 5 a.m., Seth returns to the Saratoga Lofts building with John and Kelly. They were staying at an Airbnb.
About 5:56, there's a lot of noise going on in the apartment, like running around, arguing, and then that's when I heard like the whole crash.
6:02 a.m., Seth is pronounced dead. Let's pick it up there.
And then when he
You got 1201, right? It's a Airbnb being rented by the female sitting on the ground right here, gentleman sitting in the lobby on the couch.
This is footage from the body camera worn by New Orleans police officer Gabrielle Lewis. From their conversations, it's clear this is her first death investigation.
Is this your first body?
Yeah.
If you feel like you gotta throw up, please go over
Do it
here.
over there? Okay.
Not near the body.
Right, of course.
She left the NOPD in February. That's Detective Marshall Scallon. He works in the 8th Police District. He is not a homicide detective. Until very recently, though, he handled the investigation into Seth's death. The NOPD blurred the faces of the witnesses before releasing this video to us. Scallon's report says John appeared to be on drugs with slurred speech.
Is that a good first spot?
A lot of noise going on in the apartment, like running around.
This witness tells police he heard arguing, he heard a crash, and he saw John downstairs.
He was down here on the 3rd floor, he had some blood, saying this dude was on, like, done some acid, he had hit him, he got blood coming out of his nose.
That's right, you're right up the roof.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Up in the room, the body camera shows the shattered window, clothes all over the room, and a couch with a broken arm.
Blood splatter going from the bathroom to the sink.
Police find blood in the bathroom, trailing through the apartment and by the bed. The police report says they did not collect blood samples, but they did collect white powder on the coffee table. We know Seth had cocaine in his system, and even with that white powder on the coffee table in the middle of the room, Kelly tells police she didn't know Seth was doing drugs that night.
He didn't even disclaim that he was on anything or anything at all. He just started freaking out. That's why I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know if it was like a panic attack and just like anxiety.
Police didn't question Kelly about the drugs. The Donaldsons' concern throughout all of this has been that they feel like John and Kelly aren't telling the whole story about what happened that night. John's been in trouble with the law before. He was arrested on marijuana distribution and possession charges. He pleaded guilty in 2 different states to lesser charges. He didn't want to talk to police in this case, but he did chime in occasionally when they were questioning Kelly, describing Seth having a bad acid trip.
I was laying on the bed, and then he was laying on the floor under here, and he hops up. Yeah, and he like jumps up, and he's like, no, and then he just comes and starts hitting me in the face.
Okay. And then what happened after that?
I just shoved him off of me, and then she calmed him down while I went to the bathroom.
Kelly initially told police that later Seth ran across the room and jumped out the window. That's what police wrote in their initial report. John corrects her during this interview.
He catapulted himself off the couch through the window.
I really wanted to do an interview with John and Kelly for this story, and I reached out to both of them. Kelly never responded. John did on Facebook Messenger, saying Seth punched through the window that night and then jumped through it. Please quit asking for information and let my friend rest in peace.
Is that his cell phone?
Yeah,
The phone, one of Amy's biggest problems with the investigation. She says investigators didn't care to look at it and that they essentially lost it. The initial police report says it went with the coroner, but this evidence log says otherwise. She asked Detective Scallon about it.
Where is Seth's phone? I have no idea where Seth's phone is. It could be with the Airbnb. We have no idea. Why don't you have any idea where Seth's phone is?
Finally, Amy got an answer, not from police, but a North Carolina woman Amy barely knew. She said she had the phone and that her son had gotten it from John.
Nowadays, how do you not think about a phone being something to justify suicide versus homicide?
The Donaldsons hired a digital expert to examine the phone after Scallon told them the NOPD didn't have the software to do it. That expert says the phone had no texting app, no search history, and no Snapchat on it. We know Seth used Snapchat that night. Remember, he messaged his friend.
Sorry, it's kind of hard to talk about it. He had so much going for him. Like, he loved cooking. He loved life. He had tons of friends. Like, the boy could not go somewhere without making a new friend. He had more plans for himself.
Did Seth Donaldson want to die? If it wasn't a homicide, that's the question investigators had to answer. The Donaldsons say they don't feel like anyone did. Their meeting with the Orleans coroner, Dwight McKenna, did not go well.
We're just grieving parents. We want to know what happened. We want to know why you're calling this a suicide. McKenna just did not diffuse the situation. He's a bully.
He told us to let the dog and pony show begin.
In Seth's case, McKenna isn't budging.
You do your duty for your kid to get him through school. You know, you fight for your kid, and damn it, we're going to fight for this kid when he can no longer speak for himself. And that's what we did.
Police only gave new life to the case because of Scott and Amy.
Is my love for him going to go away? Is my memory for him going to go away? You know, and you don't want it to go away, so you kind of wonder, should I stay in this awful place forever?
Even if they never know exactly what happened inside that room, the Donaldsons are determined to find out how Seth got out of it. How can you break through a window in a high-rise 12 stories high? We'll have much more on that part of the story tomorrow night at 10 in the third part of my Shattered series. In the meantime, the NOPD's Public Integrity Bureau has an investigation into the handling of Seth's case after Amy filed a complaint with the Independent Police Monitor. The NOPD says a homicide detective reviewed the case and is filing another supplemental report that will then go to the Orleans Parish DA for review.
I heard a few people suggesting
Okay.
calling 911 earlier than that.
That was courtesy of Channel 4. That was Katie Moore's report.
They wanted to give you. I watched my first
That was Katie Moore's report.
At Dame Drops told us how good Popeye's
Seth Donaldson's
That is not okay. Let me know when you're ready.
death case.
Listen to the
I don't want
truth
to call it
from
murder. I
personal
don't want to call it suicide. I'll
no
just say that
idea what you
he
were
was.
talking about. No disrespect, but why don't you listen?
He has
Someone
parted.
Witness this and try to save your son.
And as some of you can also see online, you may have seen a name pop up to make you go, uh-oh. So I need to make sure that we are all in understanding here that Seth's mother,
You'll never be able to hear the real truth otherwise.
Amy
So
Donaldson,
whatever, just let me know while I beat myself up.
is online with us.
Out the window in front of me.
And
don't know
I
what the police
did
told you.
notify
You're
her
so wrong. You have no idea.
that I would be
Love
doing
Seth.
this story today.
That's on you. Let me know.
So she
Literally,
is
I'm
online
just
with
trying to
us
cover
right
it.
now.
It's the same thing I
And Miss Amy, I am getting ready to call you.
But if I can't even talk to my friend's parents about his last moments,
Because if I'm not
without them
mistaken, you are
understanding I
in
didn't do anything wrong. That's
North
the
Carolina?
fucked up shit. Seth is one of my lifetime
In Hendersonville.
friends. As long as he knows that, I'm good as dead from this. Tell us about the video.
So that we can
My
have
question
some
would be,
conversation
Why would you be standing there videoing him
about
instead of trying to
this.
tackle him or get him help if he's in such
this
a crisis
case,
that
because
he's
this
talking
is
about
disturbing
take his
too.
own life? A simple
To a lot of
911
folks,
call,
including me.
holding
This
down
is very
safely
disturbing.
until help
Miss
gets
Amy,
there.
are you
You'll
with
be
me?
a whole lot more responsible.
Yes, sir, I am.
Good morning. How are you?
That's what a true friend.
I'm okay.
I wasn't expecting you to watch this over again. It's got to be heart-wrenching. I apologize that I had to give the audience here some insight on what was going. So I've been watching the different versions, or should I say the different
Put him on the couch.
parts of Katie Moore's story and the investigation that was done. I've taken so many notes, I ran out of paper here. as far as just taking notes in this part. How are you and your family?
Yep.
When your friend having bad
Well, we are okay. I've watched it 1,000 times. I've pretty much provided Katie Moore with most of, or a lot of, the information prior to her doing the investigation. We are astounded at what we've had to go through. Not only, experiencing the loss of a delightful child. I mean, okay, he's 22, he's a man, but still a child.
Yeah,
that's
still your baby. That's still your baby. So,
yes, sir. I've pretty much had to try my darndest to hold the police accountable, the coroner accountable, and so far we've been given little to no information and more experience of what seems to be an attempt to not give us information.
So in your opinion, I want to make sure we get this, because we can all make assumptions, but in your opinion here, why do you think this is so?
Reality, accept the truth.
I don't want to call it a cover up, but it sounds like something's being covered up. Why so?
Seth was my friend. So.
Is it
well,
the two?
Let's just start with what I'm going to start with what we do know.
Okay.
I mean, what we do know is that there has been a Hard Rock Cafe collapse in broad daylight in front of a lot of the world to see.
Mm-hmm.
But this happened a year before that, and in fact, we filed our lawsuit against the developer and we filed our lawsuit the day before the Hard Rock Cafe collapsed. And, we do want the truth. I feel like I know the truth, but at the same time, the last part of what Katie Moore, her story explains is an aspect of the city's safety and permits department, which has, I don't know the truth of whether the inspector that has been acquitted of soliciting and receiving bribes instead of doing inspections had anything to do with this building. But we all agree that there's a giant problem with safety and oversight. And, we have been trying for a year to get attention for Seth's case to protect the other how many thousands of windows are in the city that have been given historic preservation status within the building so that the developer can receive a 30% tax break, I guess is what I've heard, and, not be accountable for keeping windows at least up to the kind of standards that you expect and are by law required.
Well, one of the things I found out too, that the windows in the building were supposed to be up to hurricane code of 140 miles an hour, and I think that was changed because of the fact that after Hurricane Katrina, it has done so much damage to the windows downtown and the Hyatt and all the rest of it that you couldn't even walk down the street because windows were falling out of the sashes of the building and were coming down, crashing on the sidewalk, with the potential of killing somebody.
I know. I've read through every bit of the Louisiana, the International Building Code. I've read through every bit of the Louisiana Construction Code that follows the International Building Code. I know exactly where, well, I don't know exactly, but I know that, the 8th District of the French Quarter is the eye of the storm where that should have taken place.
So are we certain, and I know because I don't know, that these windows that are in this building where this Airbnb was, they're not up to code?
Well, the way Katie Moore, I do not know. I know that the Safety and Permits Department has said that they are up to code. But I know that the window expert that we have talked to and that Katie Moore has talked to we've talked to a number of them. I'm in North Carolina, so I showed the video that was provided to me by the witness that somehow, that's not even a part of the story, but the witness / suspect was allowed back into the room, and along with a police officer, and he collected my son's belongings, not the police officer, the witness and the victim. I mean, the two witnesses. And so that wasn't ever taken in as evidence. And while they were there, they were allowed to take video, 36-second video of the window over the couch with what appears to be about an 18-inch window seat in front of the window. And then, of course, out to the street and focusing in on my son's remains out on the balcony for 36 seconds, which the guy sent to me the next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a nice piece of this. So from that video, we've taken that video to window experts, and they say that the glass is annealed glass, which is the cheapest glass there is. It's equivalent to what's in a picture frame or in a china cabinet, and it's not appropriate for a window. Now, the reason I question whether it is or isn't in code, I don't know, because what we have been told is that when there's historic preservation status on a building, there is no code for windows above 60 feet. And that was told to us by Zach Smith at the Safety and Permits Department.
Young greatness. Wonder why.
So this building is under
and Seth Donaldson
preservation laws, some type of preservation,
well,
because from what I understand, you have to be at least 50 years old to be under preservation laws, unless you are in a historic district.
Right. Well, that's a big question. This building was built in the 50s.
Thanks.
And in New Orleans, it's hard to imagine that a 50s building with Safety and Permits Department would be historic, because. So
this building is under.
But it was renovated in 2011.
Laws,
so
some type of.
Well, whether it's historic or not, but it seems like the city's very generous with its, or I guess it's the city, the Historic Preservation Committee. I don't know, but they're very generous with how historic preservation status is granted, and I have no idea. I haven't looked into that. Don't know how that process works, but. The end of Katie Moore's story, after she found this out through the Safety and Permits Department, was that at present there are over 200 buildings in the French Quarter that have that status and are being used.
Hi, Jerry. Scott Donaldson here. My wife, Amy.
To house people. They are being used either as apartments, hotels, short-term rentals.
That's dangerous. That's very dangerous.
Multiply that by how many windows you see. I mean, I can't go anywhere now without looking at a window, punching a window, imagining what could happen in a window, especially after New Orleans. When New Orleans was put back together after Katrina, I've read that, the strategy was not to rebuild as it was horizontally, but the strategy was going to be to rebuild vertically, if that makes sense, to house a lot more people in high rises.
So let me ask you a couple of questions on some of the stuff that I wrote down that made me go, well, what in the world? The investigation was originally done by a detective, not a homicide detective. A homicide detective was not called to the scene with the potential of saying that this is a homicide, ruled as a homicide or something, because Marshall, whatever his last name was, Stuart Stannard, or whatever his last name was.
Scallon.
Seemed to be doing this as in making it sound like it was already classified as a suicide before there was an investigation done.
Exactly.
Even when your witness said he heard arguing and then he heard a crash.
Exactly. So that witness, even after, now we're at 460, 70-something days since this took place.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken this case to the Independent Police Monitor, the Inspector General, the Independent Police Monitor, the Integrity Board, and they are doing now dealing with my second complaint. My first complaint was 63 points long. The Independent Police Monitor commissioned, I guess, the new detective, which was brought onto the case sometime in April 11th, I believe, and assigned him with 23 action items to do. And he was supposed to respond to us every 2 weeks and give us updates.
Mm-hmm.
And even as of this day, that witness has never been formally interviewed.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
he was on the body camera. Yep.
So do they know who he is?
Yes, and I do too. I mean, I found him on Facebook months and months ago. I know what his, there's more to his statement about what he witnessed.
It sounds like you've done more investigation than the police department.
You would not believe. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. The blood. I heard in the report here, it says there was blood coming out of when the one they called John, saying that it was coming out of his nose. He had a bloody nose. But it was also stated that there was blood in the Airbnb. And no blood samples were taken?
No, sir.
Nothing?
No, they, what you said before, that it was ruled, there were 3 homicide detectives on the scene within the first 15 minutes.
None of them did the investigation.
No, they came and left. They had to go, I was told the first day that they came and left because they had to go to a bigger crime, which was Young Greatness's murder that night.
Right, the rapper.
The rapper.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's been the big question all along. The Detective Scallon, who is a follow-up investigator, he's not a homicide investigator. We can't get he basically now is saying that the coroner's office ruled it a suicide within the first 15 minutes.
But I thought the coroner's office couldn't rule on what was a...
I guess it depends on the coroner.
How does the coroner rule on a suicide and not on scene? Because he's not the detective. He rules on what he sees as far as forensic evidence, right?
Well, he should.
Okay.
I mean, so the coroner has, there's a person within the coroner's office who's called a death investigator.
Okay, yes.
So he's the only, Dr. McKenna was not there.
Mm-hmm.
But the death investigator at the coroner's office was there. He's no longer in the coroner's office in New Orleans. He's moved to another state very soon after this took place. For reasons that only he can say, but I've heard from him.
What's the cover-up, though? Is it just the windows? Is it the building? What is it? What's the cover-up, though? This is your opinion. I'm not making sure that everybody understand that this is an opinion here. So what is it?
It's multifaceted. I really don't know what was the first domino to fall, and whether the cover-up now is just that we made a mistake, we were too busy, and now we have to cover up. I don't know if the coroner... What I do know is that the death investigator that was there, who is now no longer there. I mean, I found him on LinkedIn months later and talked to him on the phone in March. And he communicated with me because Katie Moore had reached out to him, and he really doesn't want to make a statement because of any ramifications within his job. But he told me that he told everybody there on the scene that there's no way this is a suicide.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Seth's phone. It was given back to you by somebody that you did not know in North Carolina. How did that happen? It wasn't taken into evidence?
No, it was not taken. Nothing was taken into evidence. I suppose the mistake that we made at the time is that we waited till after Seth's funeral to go down there. I mean, we couldn't breathe. I mean, we already had.
No, that's understandable. The loss of a child is devastating.
I mean, yeah. So, and we didn't want to see what we didn't want to see. We wanted to remember Seth the way we wanted to remember Seth. But instead, I have to do this myself and learn, it's a little bit better to know what I know now than to go through the process of imagining and guessing and trying to figure it out.
So let me go back because you told me one thing and then we went to the next here. But let me ask you this question. And I know Susan Hudson and I know all of her folks in the police investigator's office. Did Susan, was she satisfied what was done? Did anybody say anything else to her about, look, we're not getting what we need, no cooperation? What did Susan say?
Well, I met with Susan last Wednesday. That's right. It was last Tuesday. I was down in New Orleans last week for a week. Mm-hmm. And I met with her on Tuesday. I spent the majority of my communication. I spoke with Susan early on, and she has other people on her staff that I know have kept her informed. But I personally hadn't, had a chance to meet with her until last Thursday. And I think she's pretty, she's asking the police to hold themselves accountable. That's her job. Mm-hmm. She's assigned them with jobs to do, and they haven't done it. So I think she's not, I can only interpret what I believe her opinion is. She has not said, I can't believe this is going on like this. She hasn't said that. So I really don't know what she thinks. Mm-hmm. But I would, she's doing her job, trying to hold them accountable. And every time I have a new complaint, they add to it. Right. I've probably, I read through the consent decree. I know the details of how a crime scene should be handled. And when I filed my first complaint through the independent police monitor, it was, I believe it was 63 points long.
Conclusions.
And when the Integrity Bureau closed
about
the
your
case,
findings, your conclusions.
We got a letter on September the 4th, or dated September the 4th, I believe, maybe the 6th. It's baffling. They closed a complaint that's 63 points long, and their statement was that their investigation concluded that these two individuals were there and that the coroner ruled it a suicide.
That's it?
Yep.
One of the things that shook me in this piece that we saw with the body cams.
So you were just investigating essentially the white shirt portion of this.
What I said to you was kind of verbatim from the memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
If in fact we had found anything else, we would have had an obligation to report it to NOPD, and obviously I don't want to speculate about that. We did not in this particular instance refer
to be under preservation laws unless you are in a historic district.
Right.
It was kind of verbatim from the memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
If in fact we had found anything else, we would have had an obligation to report it to NOPD, and obviously I don't want to speculate about that. We did not in this particular instance refer any additional matters to them. Our authority in these administrative ends of the investigation, because they have, you already know this, they have a robust internal affairs procedure and process, and it does take some expertise in that area because police officers are given additional rights and things of this type. But in an administrative matter like this, they have to increase objectivity and independence on the investigation itself, since it could include the superintendent, his deputies, or those folks in the commander/captain level. The inspector general in the previous administration of this office entered into a memorandum of understanding. The current superintendent and I we didn't have to re-implement it. We signed a new agreement just to make sure that both our names were on it. As you know, he's been on board for a year or so now. I forget.
Neither one of them said anything about the cocaine or knew that there was cocaine on the coffee table. No, nobody knew. You're there.
I don't know. I'm going to try to be humorous at the moment and say, yeah, I think they all thought it was beignet powder.
Yeah, I guess you got to have a sense of humor to keep from crying sometime. But this.
Yep.
I would think that they would have somebody sampling something, saying, hey, look, take this into evidence, make that a piece of the evidence. The blood spatter or whatever that was, at least have a toxicology report on whose blood that was. I also saw downstairs that the witness said, hey, look, I heard arguing and then I heard a crash. And now you got your other guy that's sitting down here with a bloody nose. And then as I go into the apartment, I'm looking around and said that the sofa had one of the arms broken off of it. And as I see the body cam footage, it looked like there had been a struggle.
Yes, sir. Although in the middle of the room, there's a glass coffee table with, vases and flowers pretty much undisturbed.
So something happened.
It wasn't a huge struggle in my,
No, it wasn't a huge struggle. It looks like there was a struggle, though. Something happened.
Yeah.
And with that being said, how do you shut this down as a suicide? If I'm going to jump out a window, I'm just going to jump out a window. And how does somebody get a running
Who's going to imagine
to jump out a window?
Who's going to imagine? Who in the world would imagine that a window would break? I mean, that okay, I'm suicidal. I want to end my life. I'm going to take a running leap and I'm going to dive through a window. Mm-hmm. Who would ever, no matter what state they're in, ever imagine that that's possible?
So let me ask you this too: his phone. His friend said that they were Snapchatting, and then all of a sudden you get a phone and no Snapchat, nothing on the phone. So you think the phone had been tampered with?
Definitely. I mean, our forensic detective said it was. And it's not like it just went down to factory settings because, something happened. It was, those items were deleted.
Oh, and they're not
And here's
recoverable.
this. They are recoverable.
Okay.
The New Orleans Police Department has had the phone since April. The detective that did get us to the place we're at presently with the phone in sort of like a half-restored state has sent them a letter and made phone calls and said, you need to get the FBI involved, or you need to certainly to yourself. It's called, I don't even know what it's called. It's basically taking the phone apart. All of the information is still on the phone, but it's in the hard drive of the phone. And I could do it privately. It would cost about $1,500. But I want the police to do it because they don't accept one single thing that I discover as fact, and they won't even follow up on it.
So yesterday, and I know you don't know this is your first time hearing me talk to you about this, so let me give you some details. Before I think I told you that I was going to do this not only in the morning, but I'm going to do this afternoon as well. Yesterday, okay. I had a conversation with some of my sources, which include somebody really close to the folks in PIB. And he has agreed that he would listen to a couple of the issues that I'm bringing up with him. One of the ones was the blood in the hotel room. I need to know, did anybody, anytime, get any samples of the blood? And if so, it was spatter. And if it is, whose is it? Did you take any blood samples from anybody else? Question 2, why was the person in the room, which was identified as, John or whoever this was, why did he have a bloody nose? And then the story between him and the young lady that was in the room, they don't match. Miss Amy, one is saying that he just ran across the room and jumped out the window, and the other one saying that there was something else going on. So if you...
Well, let me tell you how many stories they've told me since.
Okay.
They've told me about 4. They have about 4 or 5 different stories of how it happened and 4 or 5 different stories of why it happened.
So they were let go? And no interrogation at all?
Well, what I understand from what Katie Moore has told me, because she's seen the full body cam video, I have not, that they they gave the chance to speak to him alone, and he either pled the fifth. I've heard two stories. He pled the fifth, or he was so high he couldn't speak. I don't know which one's true. And or put a story together. He was too high, and then eventually, well, they were. The police report says they were brought to the 8th District office or whatever at 9 a.m. Fahad was interviewed first, and then they were released at 9:24. After Fahad, I'm sorry, I named name. After the girl was questioned or made a statement along with the guy sitting beside her when he interrupted. You saw that on the video.
So one of the things I saw on the body cam video is that the witness who said that he heard arguing and then a crash, he stated the girl's over there, the other guy's inside sitting on the couch. And in that video, they said that somebody, I don't want to call his name either, that he had to be high because he was, in his statement, slurring very badly.
Yes, sir.
So there had to be something going on if he was that high and slurring. So the first thing I would think is that they would at least give them the hold. They would hold them for either 24 or 48 hours. I think they have up to 72 hours to hold them to get the story right. Because something don't sound right in this case. That you get all this going on, and then you're talking about he just jumped out a window?
Yep, it's very much not right.
That you can provide that would help me formulate a request should I send
anything on. I'll just make sure that from her review that would not violate the memorandum of understanding. So Ed's suggestion, I think, is a good first step to take. And then I'll be able to answer that question if you're not successful on whether I can disclose that. Okay. All right, Mr. and Mrs. Donaldson.
I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I didn't know if you're closing. Well,
No, I'm not going.
did your investigation include Safety and Permits Department?
Let me pause a moment. The investigation was conducted pursuant to our memorandum of understanding with NOPD.
Right.
We do not have an allegation regarding the safety and permits that would fall clearly within the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, especially since you have, as I understand it, a civil matter going on in that regard. Now, it is known to the public in New Orleans that my office has been involved in an ongoing, an investigation of safety and permits in other areas that have resulted in the indictment or criminal information against one individual. And I disclosed to the mayor and the city council that we were involved in ongoing investigations of some activities at safety and permits not related to your son's circumstances. So, in other words, we're looking at other issues related to safety and permits than the ones you've raised. And at this time, I don't have a factual or legal basis to look any further into the issues that you raise in your lawsuit. I've not looked at the lawsuit. But if there are some that you think might fall within our jurisdiction that we don't know about, you can certainly make those available to us. But right now, the short answer is we have other matters where we're reviewing safety and permits that have been disclosed to the public. I'm dancing around the head of a pin. Mr. and Mrs. Donaldson, you deserve some straight talk. We're involved in looking at serious potential violations of criminal law regarding safety and permits.
Right, because you got the Steak and Hard Rock Cafe in the middle of Canal Street.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So forgive me for going into that routine. I was thinking, okay, I got to talk that way, but that's not. You deserve to know that. I mean, and we're going to be continuing to work on those issues for some time. I'll be glad to share the letters with you. They're in the public domain that I sent to the mayor and the city council back in January.
Oh, I have it.
The detective told us when we asked these very same questions, day one, and it took us, let me tell you what, when we got the phone call from Marshall Scallon, it was at 11 a.m.
And this is the detective. This is the detective, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it's 11 our time. We're in North Carolina, so it's 10:15 your time.
Mm-hmm.
So an hour earlier, the two were released. And they were allowed to go back into the room and take video, like I said before, with an officer. And
for what?
Then,
why were they allowed to go back in the room to take video?
I have no idea. When we asked Marshall Scallon that, he said that we didn't understand modern day crime scenes.
No,
he
that's
said it's
tainting
not like
your crime scene. That is tainting.
He said it's not. He said it's not like television. I was like, you don't use yellow tape. That's just for TV. He said, I don't know what he said to that, but he said it's not like television.
Wow. They do use yellow tape, though. I've been on several crime scenes, and they do use yellow tape. So.
Well, they were allowed to go back in the room and cross the yellow tape if there was any. But I don't believe that there was any yellow tape.
No, there was not. Now, not in the video that I saw. As a matter of fact, the video that I saw with the body cam, that they're walking around in there looking at several different things and then going over to the window.
Yes.
So, okay. So, where are you now? No, I mean, where are you in this? You have not let up on the investigation. Where are you on this now? Have you seen the autopsy report?
I personally have not. I mean, I've read through the findings, and we've given it over to a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But that was back in July, and she said that there was not enough in the report to make any decision one way or the other, despite the fact that she said a coroner does not have the authority to classify.
Cannot. So
no.
In that
what
sense,
the report
in that sense itself should disqualify the findings of this report saying that it was a suicide.
It should. But the police have what we were told by Commander Gernon in January was that the police and the coroner work very separately. They do their own thing, and sometimes they may have a difference of opinion. But that is not what we have seen. We were told all along by Marshall Scallon till January that he could not investigate until the coroner told him to investigate. We go to the coroner's office and they say that's not true. They do the investigation. I've got about 10 emails that we sent out and phone calls attempted to be made saying, who's doing the investigation? Who's in charge here? And neither one of them would respond or answer or clarify. So the coroner's report states that Seth died of multiple blunt force trauma due to defenestration.
What?
Well, you have to look in Wikipedia about what defenestration is. I think it's just one of the many ways that somebody's trying to pull the wool over our eyes. But, I've got Google. I can look it up. Defenestration means being pushing something or someone through a window.
So does that mean that somebody pushed him through the window?
I don't know, because there's another term called self-defenestration that was not used.
You know, you got me Googling. So wait a minute. I'm looking around and saying to myself, and it's not funny. I'm going, wait a minute. I'm scratching my head.
I know.
This is making me defenestration, meaning somebody pushed you through a window. And if that's in a report, does that mean that somebody pushed him through the window? Because that's a homicide.
Should be, but that's, you know, we went to the coroner's office and asked him for help to understand how he ruled this a suicide. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much the most antagonistic conversation I've ever had with anyone. And it was only about 3 minutes long.
That was
and he said, yes. We said, how did you rule this a suicide? We had with us a manual from the CDC, Center for Disease Control manual. And he's a doctor. You know, he ought to know about supervisory boards and processes. But the manual is the manual for coroners and death investigators. Chapter 14, I think, is on how to determine suicide as the cause of death. And it is very much the last thought. It is after working up a, investigation as a homicide. The consent decree says any death should be considered a homicide to begin with, no matter what, no matter what. So you work it up that way to rule everything else out. So he told us immediately he didn't need any he told us, first of all, to let the dog and pony show begin.
What does that mean?
He said, just meant that we were there to just, have a little parade.
So you think that you're just doing this to get attention?
I don't know. I'm just telling you, it's just old school talk. Here, be on display. Let's see what you have to show. And we said we had that manual, and he said he didn't need any kind of manual because he knows it when he sees it. And we said, I said, what about the police report? He said, I don't have a police report. I don't need any police report. I don't know who Marshall Scallon is. I don't care who Marshall Scallon is. I know it when I see it. I said, you see people going through solid glass windows all the time when there's another person in the room with a bloody nose. And he said, this meeting is adjourned. I will see you in court.
So are there any ligature marks on Seth other than the blunt force trauma? And I'm sorry I have to put it
very clear.
I have it.
I can share this with you. We are taking all of the aspects of that matter extremely seriously.
So let me ask you this. Are you guys looking back at any other inspections? What's your look back window? If you see this, I'm just going to say it, you might not, but the Hard Rock Cafes in Canal Street, do you really think that's the first violation, the first problem?
No, they've reported.
Or are you going to look back further? How far are you going to look back?
No, I can't comment on what we're looking at now. I can share with you what was in the press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that is the allegations against the one individual that's been charged go back to 2014 with kind of an open-ended assertion in the charging document alleging that he took money in exchange for approving permits. So that would be my official way of answering that. But yeah, it goes back further.
Is his name in the public? Is that guy's name in the public domain?
It's Kelvin Richardson.
Kevin.
And there was a press release issued by the U.S. Attorney's Office that also disclosed that the Office of Inspector General had contributed to that investigation along with other federal agencies.
Okay.
Can I ask, I'm paying quite a lot of attention to the Safety and Permits Department and the new job description that the mayor has created that seems quite interesting for the new director, the Sonder person that came from San Francisco through Sonder. What Zach Smith, the former director, told us
he told us two different things. One was that there was no oversight for windows. There was no code for windows over 60 feet. And then he told Katie Moore a few months later, and before he was demoted, that they weren't required to do anything related to the Saratoga loft apartments because it was historic. And he told her that there was really no actual means for how a building is decided to be historic or not historic. And I know you're not going to comment on it, but I wanted to comment on it because I think there's a big problem right there. And I see that the mayor's office is just bringing all those departments together. And that's concerning.
Well, I made a note of that. We will add that to
Yes. You can follow me on Facebook and see everything that I think regularly.
Mr.
I don't do Facebook.
That way, were there any bruising? Did anybody say that there was bruising, like there was a fight, like someone had grabbed his arm, had thrown him through the window, or any of that was post-mortem?
Well, like I said, I haven't seen the report. I don't really care to see the report. I have read a description of the report, and I have talked at length to the person that we had do the second opinion. Mm-hmm. I mean, and she's testified in very large cases. And the report states the only physical description of an injury that's written about is a large 4-inch long by 2-inch deep cut on the right, basically armpit to shoulder blade area of Seth on the right side. There's no description of anything else.
Is that
physically.
From glass breakage? Is that from glass? Was this done?
Well, that's my belief. I mean, my belief is if he actually, if it was an accident, Seth was sitting in the window or standing in the window and leaned on the window, and that when the window broke, that's what cut his right arm.
But this is under the arm, correct?
Armpit, shoulder blade area, more on the back, sort of, under the arm, yeah.
So for that to be the cut, I guess my question is, did he have his hands up? So if he got his hands up, then the glass cuts him from underneath his armpit to his back area. So was his hands up trying to defend himself or not go through that glass and hit his head?
I mean, you're asking me, who's putting together this the rest of the evidence tells me, or the rest of the story and the testimony and the actions tell me that Seth was standing either on the arm of the couch with maybe, or in the window. He couldn't be standing in the windowsill because it's only 4 feet tall. Mm-hmm. Seth's not a big guy. He can't really be crouched in a windowsill. But I believe that, and he's left-handed for one thing. So the police report states that the witness says that Seth punched him with a closed right fist, which is, supposed to say that he intended to punch him out, but Seth's left-handed. So the injury on the arm of the right hand, to me, shows that the glass at least broke in his armpit. It's kind of hard to go out face forward and the glass break, on your backside.
So in this area, there's no one that saw anything, no cameras, nothing? No checking around to see if there were any, because you're talking about an area that's under surveillance all the time now.
Yeah.
There are cameras on all the buildings. There are cameras for watching the street. I mean, there got to be something. Somebody should have had some type of surveillance.
You would think
somewhere. No one checked to see. If
well, I've been. Let me tell you what. I mean, I know very little. I've got hundreds of emails and hundreds of attempted phone conversations and 8 different trips down there. 7 trips, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not getting response from anybody. I mean, every single time we're face to face with someone, I have to go through the whole thing over again, have a 2-hour meeting, and then them promise to get it, to look into it, and then never to hear from anybody again. So I don't have answers to anything. I've heard, the first time we went down after Seth died was November the 14th. On that day, we met with Marshall Scallon, and we met with Brian Laparolari in the coroner's office.
Mm-hmm.
And it hadn't yet, to us, been ruled a suicide yet. We thought we were still having an actual investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Marshall Scallon did refer to a video from across the street from the pavilion at the Tulane apartments, medical apartments.
Okay.
And it showed that Seth exited the window at 5:47, which is about 6 minutes before the 911 call was made that stated that there was an attempted suicide.
So it shows Seth going through this window.
Well, I haven't seen it. I have still not seen it. It's not been released. It's
is it part of
our
evidence?
lawyer has tried to. It has been, but our lawyer can't get it.
But your case been closed.
Yes, sir. It's apparently it's not one of the city videos. It's a private video and they're not. At least our lawyer told us that they weren't releasing it to him, and that the police told us it was too graphic for us to see.
So
the truth.
Your attorney could subpoena it because you have a case.
Yes.
You have
well,
sued.
we don't have a criminal case, and I assume he is going to be doing that.
No.
This is just what I learned
case, but
last.
you have sued the city, and you're using this as part of your case. I don't know what the
we
terminology
haven't yet sued the city.
Okay. All right. Your 51 points that you said this case was mishandled. Do you have a copy of that?
You're a wise man. You're a wise man.
Mm-hmm.
You probably sleep well.
I don't mean to change the tone. These are serious matters.
No, sir, but we have to.
I have to say that the incident where the federal judge's family was brutally attacked by this guy that was able to obtain their address and was on, obviously, based on news reports, obviously a vendetta against that particular federal judge. Ed, of course, is a former FBI agent. I'm a former assistant United States attorney. Right now, I say after 40 years of being a licensed attorney, all my friends at my age are still working as judges. So we are in a time of some uncertainty and obviously people who are acting out on all kinds of evil motives.
Well,
I don't do Facebook because I'm easy enough to find as it is.
Yeah. I don't blame you. Okay.
We have a Facebook page for the IG's office, so I will instruct those who know how to do Facebook to add you as a person so we can get any information that we distribute on Facebook and on Twitter.
Oh, I'm already following you on Facebook, your IG page.
Good. We need to update it.
Yes, you do.
Make sure that we. Thank you. That's something that I'm not pleased with. Now, any other questions about this until you get or are able to obtain a copy of the report? We will reconvene at a date and time convenience to you.
Yes, sir.
Can I get a copy of it? I'd love to go through it. I mean, I just wrote it down.
Yeah.
At least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I wrote down 10 just from what I saw off of this video from Katie Moore.
Yeah, you have access to it.
Okay, and tell me about and I really don't want to bring this part up, so forgive me. Tell me about this drug usage. Is this true that he was using drugs?
No, Seth was not at all.
Was there toxicology? Because his friend said that he took some acid. It showed him taking acid.
Well, that was in the toxicology report.
It was, okay. And
yeah, I mean, what Seth had worked. He was working 80 hours a week at Commander's Palace and Gregory's Restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
He was I'm his mother, so of course I want to believe the best, but I wasn't there.
And that's why I'm trying to be very careful in how I ask you that.
Right. I can rely on his boss's statements and his coworkers' statements and his habits. And I also know what his relationship with the witness had been, which it had been a negative relationship about 4 years ago. And from 4 years on,
you're talking about the two people that were in the room with him, right?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, he was only with them for 4 hours.
So let me ask you this. Are they from North Carolina? What were they doing here?
Well, I don't know. They drove down there in
to come
a Tesla.
See Seth?
Well, I don't. They say that they went to Voodoo Festival, and that she posted a video from Instagram on Instagram, and that Seth said, "Hey, I'd like to see you while you're here." And I believe it was it wasn't planned, because I've gotten into Seth's Google through his Gmail. Here's the thing about the phone. Even before I had the phone, I was able to track his phone, internet, social media activities, within a week. Once I reset, when I didn't have the phone, I assumed I'd never get the phone back. I reset his Gmail password, which he had whatever settings set so that he could keep record, I guess, of his internet search and his, so I know the timeline of what he was doing. He left work at 12:30 that night. He got on a blue bike. I mean, that even shows up in his Google, because he, it was rented through a Google app.
Right.
And he rode his blue bike home. He picked up his neighbor's dog. He walked the neighbor's dog. He searched for Halloween costumes for his girlfriend. He'd already bought one for himself, and he was looking for one for her. And was listening to Audible, books of the 21st century, while he was riding the bike. And then he walked. I guess we can see that he did some map questing, and you don't get to see exactly what texts are done, but you can see that he accessed the texting app, or accessed the messaging app, or accessed Bumble. You can't see exactly what was done. So somewhere in there, the girl says that he responded to her Instagram video and said, "Let's get together." And so they met at the Chop Yard Bar at 1:30, which closes at 1:35, they told me. And then the last use of Seth's phone is at 2:36. So whatever Snapchatting was done, I have a little bit of a question about whether it was Seth's activity or whether it was the other guy's activity, because at some point in the night, the other guy has Seth's phone and Seth's not using his phone.
So it has come to my attention, and I don't know if it's come to your attention, is that the guy that we're talking about that was also there with Seth and the young lady supposedly was a low-qualified drug dealer?
Low qualified?
I don't want to call him, I'm just saying that he was dealing drugs. Did that come back to you as well?
Well, all I can say is that that's his reputation. I don't, I
so
know
it is his
that
reputation.
That is his reputation, and the experience that Seth had with him in high school, which got Seth into some early trouble, was big enough that by Seth's junior year, he chose to go to school outside of this county to get away from this guy and his network and go to school in Virginia. So since that time, Seth really has worked hard to not spend time with him in particular.
Did anybody do a background check? Look at his rap sheet? Because I understand that he's got a pretty extensive rap sheet, and it's not just dealing drugs.
If you obtain a copy of the report and have questions about our findings or how we conducted this particular review.
I have one more question.
Me too. When did you send the report to NOPD?
At least 30 days ago, if not more.
Well, Ed told me that he was finished with his report on April 23rd.
Ed, can you tell me when we transmitted that?
I think we sent it about.
Yeah. I was out on the 23rd. What he was referring to is that I was out of the office.
Right, I know.
For about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so it was sometime after that. I don't recall.
Right, I just meant it as a reference.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
That's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that NOPD couldn't tell me they didn't have it yet. That's all.
No, sir. They have it.
They can still tell you that.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Do you have the contact phone number for the commander, for Commander Westbrook?
Yes, I do.
Amy
but
does.
She, she's very difficult to communicate with. But yes, we have the phone number.
Okay, and I sent you the since you were asking for since Mr. Harper mentioned the press release, that's a public document, so I already sent it to you on safety and permit, and then if I can recommend, maybe wait 24 hours before you contact Ms. Westbrook, and I'll facilitate them knowing that you're going to be calling them, and then so they'll be ready for the call, and then hopefully you'll have a smooth transaction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. and Mrs. Donaldson, again, my deepest condolences on the loss of your son, and I will be able to say more about what we could do, but we did do our best to review those issues under our clear-cut authority. So, but I didn't want to end without saying that to you and Mrs. Donaldson at the same time.
Thank you. I have one more additional question because I always have more questions. Is there any way for us to know whether the FBI is actually investigating this or not?
Even if we knew that, we probably wouldn't be at liberty to discuss that. So I don't know what the Bureau is doing would be my response.
Do you ever come into a situation where the breadth of your jurisdiction comes to an end and you forward something over there to them?
That does happen, yes. As you'll see when you read that press release, that case that we worked jointly with, I think the Bureau is specifically named in the press release, and the other agencies, just the disclosure of that relationship generally is handled by whoever is primarily responsible for the matter. So we refer matters to them, have in the past, and it's in the public domain, and we'll continue with that practice.
Okay.
With our federal, you noticed that I'm a former Fed, Ed's a former Fed.
Mm-hmm.
General counsel was with the U.S. Attorney's Office for 30-something years as an assistant U.S. attorney. So that's part of our mission, is to act in a law enforcement capacity, and when those administrative matters that we look into turn into facts and circumstances that may have a foundation in state or federal criminal law, then we work with those partners on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't ask. I don't want to say that over. I mean, I have to live in this community where he.
I understand. Don't let me get you in trouble. Don't let me get you in trouble. but
I just, people who have, that's one thing you might do when you have, all these questions is run a background check on somebody. I know how fast that can be. You can do that in 10 minutes.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I'm not sure they chose not to do that.
Oh, so you don't. No, they didn't. No, I'm telling you.
Well, I'm guessing they didn't.
No, I'm telling you.
I know they didn't.
Yeah.
I know. Well, they also didn't investigate his car. Here he is in a room, having gotten into a fight, and there's cocaine in the room or white powder that his girlfriend rented, and he's there, and the witness tells us not only did the police not inspect the guy's Tesla, a $100,000 car with GPS locating services on it. The police told us all along they never found his car. I gave them the VIN number, after I did my background check.
Mm-hmm.
And they continued to say they never found the car. And that was a surprising thing two things. The witness is telling the police, why aren't you searching his car? And instead, the girl is allowed to get things out of the car. And the guy is allowed to have the car towed before he goes to the police station for questioning.
Oh, wow.
That's what the witness told me. And I suppose that's why the police won't interview him again, because I told them that I knew that.
And but the only thing that needs to be done is get a receipt from the towing company.
I know. I mean, but I didn't learn that until May, and there's been so much cover-up, and I can only do so much. I haven't been able to find what towing company that was, but I was surprised when I was just down there
and it was
to
downtown,
see how
right?
absolutely small. Yeah, it was on Loyola.
More than likely, it was Rudy Smith.
Okay.
More than likely.
Well, how absolutely small. There's only like 4 parking spaces in front of the building.
Right.
It's really small. It's hard to see that there could be, a whole lot of confusion there.
How about the valet? Did they have his valet?
Everything you're going to ask, I don't know. Nobody has attempted to act like they really want to learn more.
So, well, let me ask you this then. Did anybody go to the front desk and say, hey, we need as much information about where this room was registered to? We need to know how many cars or what cars were parked and valeted under this room number. Because, look, if you only have 4 parking spaces here, more than likely you either put your car in a parking lot or a parking garage. And
the car was parked on the street.
Right. But if your car's parked on the street, then guess what? There are video cameras there.
I know.
And if he had that car
like
towed, then the tow company would be able to tell you where they towed it to.
I know. I mean, the detective here told, we've had a detective here in North Carolina take some statements from some kids because there was also Snapchatting done while in the police presence, giving his own manipulated version of things on Snapchat 4 hours before we were even told Seth had died. So when Scallon called us, he said, has anybody else called you? I guess he assumed that somebody else who saw Snapchat would call us and tell us our son had committed suicide, because that's what was out on Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
And the deception from the beginning was intentional. I'm not saying that Scallon is deceiving, but I'm just saying he was stuck with a situation, I believe, that was out of his control.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he called us, he said, your son is deceased. He fell onto a balcony. And, all hysteria broke out. It was another half hour before we got a friend to call back to him, well, probably more than a half hour, to say, what do you mean he fell onto a balcony? It took 3 phone calls to hear that there was ever a 12th floor and a window involved. I mean, he wanted us to believe he fell off of the 2nd floor balcony. And he said he was at a party. He didn't say he was at a party with 2 people and went through a solid glass window.
Was there possibly anybody else there, or was this it? These two, the young lady and the man that was there that was identified as John. I'm gonna just say John. Are these the only 2 that were there? And does this building have cameras in the hallway, surveillance?
Well, I'll tell you what I was told.
Oh, Lord.
Back in November, he told us that the cameras were so poorly situated and the quality was so bad, he couldn't tell. And he said it took hours and hours to look through video camera, and he doesn't have the time to do all that. And he told us that, what did he tell us? He told us that he wasn't even sure at that time when and how they entered the building.
What?
That was 17 days after he told us that he hadn't been able to figure out how they got into the building or when.
I'm really feeling like this case has been just blown off, and I can imagine you're feeling the same way. I hate to say it that way. I feel like this ended up being secondary. This child killed himself. Let's move on.
Well, that's what my husband thinks, but I think it's that's where innocent people who want to do the good just miss it. And that's not what I think after having gotten through this process. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of opportunity along the way for law enforcement to say, oh, look, that's how it was. We were too busy. We didn't pay attention. We didn't see. We jumped to conclusions. And that they now have the opportunity to fix it. But they're choosing to ask me to stop asking questions.
Doesn't sound like you're a good listener on that part.
No, I'm not. I've when my kids were little, well, not little, but teenagers and getting into their trouble, I used to tell them that my prayer was to let what was done in darkness be brought to light, because I just can't stand a lie. And they knew that. And, I really can't stand it when there's adults doing it whose job is to find the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a couple of meetings that I got to do today before I get on the air this afternoon. I'd like to call you back this afternoon because I'm going to be on WBOK, and this will be my topic of conversation this afternoon. So I want to ask you some of these questions. I am going to reach out for Katie Moore to see if she can also give me some insight here. I did talk to somebody from PIB yesterday, and I will tell you this, they do know you very well. That was interesting. I have not talked to Susan Hudson. I am going to call her or Ursula because I know Ursula as well, and I know Susan Hudson very well because I've done some investigations prior to, and I've also done some things with the police monitor's office. Now, yesterday I had a conversation with Chief Ferguson, who was not the chief of police during this time, but I think Harrison was at the time. And from what I understand, what I do understand is that they are so short-sighted and short-handed with detectives, homicides, and all this other stuff, and they don't want to pay overtime, is that a detective has to work 8 hours and 8-hour shifts and cannot even work past those 8 hours. So they can only do what they need to do, and then they have to go home. They don't get paid for working overtime. So that's been a real issue. So if I got a witness or somebody that can give me some insight, if it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and somebody calls me and says, hey, look, I want to meet you out, I want to tell you this, I can't do it until the next day. I'll call you tomorrow. By that time, the witness is gone anyway. They're going to change their mind.
Well, that's why you take care of it at the time it happens.
So, what I saw
there were three homicide detectives on the scene.
Right. And what I saw in this video, when I learned that Mr. Scallon, Marshall Scallon, was he was a detective, but he wasn't a homicide detective, and that this was ruled a suicide, but not by the the police department. It was ruled a suicide by the coroner's office. And I was like, when did the coroner's office start giving you rulings on scene?
Well, let me tell you, when I got Seth's evidence back from the coroner's office on the March, I think it's March the 12th, the paperwork, this was when we're still trying to find Seth's phone, and chef's knife kit and backpack and car keys or house keys and shoes and shirts. The evidence log that Laparolari wrote when he released only Seth's passport and wallet said that it was suicide, and then in parentheses it says UI. And I can't think of any other acronym UI could stand for, but under investigation.
Right.
So in March, was it or was it not under investigation?
Well, I'm going to ask some questions by the time I get to work. I will call you this afternoon. It'll probably be my time, 2 o'clock.
All righty.
And I hope you
I just happened to see that you were on live. It's funny, it popped up. I was at the bank, it popped up that you were live, and I was like, let's see what he's going to do.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I saw you when you popped up on the screen. I was like, oh, boy. I didn't even want you to pop up while I'm playing this because I know that this got to be heart-wrenching.
I've seen it. No, you want to know? I'm so happy that somebody else cared.
Well, I'll make sure that I ask the questions. I know it's going to ruffle some feathers because when I asked it yesterday to my sources, they were like, "Uh-oh, here we go." She done called everybody and she putting everybody on notice. I said, "Well, I'm on notice and I need to ask you some questions." So.
Well, that's what I tried to do along the way. I tried to put everybody on notice, and just deal with it now and don't deal with it 2 years from now when we have a giant ass lawsuit going on.
What's the owner of this building saying? Is the owner of the building or the management company even saying anything about this too?
No, they haven't ever responded to us.
Okay. All right.
I mean, they know that they're in a civil suit with our lawyer.
Okay. All right. Well, they're not going to respond to you then as long as they're in a civil suit.
No.
But that's okay.
No, but they had yeah.
We'll ask the questions. I'll call you this afternoon and see if I can get you back on the air.
Thank you.
Thank you so
All
much.
right,
And
appreciate it.
God be
Thank
with you and your family. We care about you. And look, because when I saw Hendersonville, North Carolina, I was like, oh, I'm from Raleigh, Durham.
Yeah, well, I'm from we have a lot of the same stomping ground. I went to NC State, and my husband did, and I'm from Eastern North Carolina.
Oh, so you went to? Well, I'm not going to hold that Wolfpack thing against you because I went to UNC.
Yeah, I know you're. Well, Scott works for UNC Hospital now.
Okay, well, he's all right then. My mother worked for Duke for about 22 years, so all of us in the same area. Thank you much. I'll call you this afternoon. I appreciate your time.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Right. Bye-bye.
Heart-wrenching. I gotta do it, y'all. I'll start over again at 1 o'clock for all of you that joined in and didn't know what was going on. Something right. And this definition of defenestration says the action of throwing someone out of a window. If that's the case, then we got a homicide case. We'll find out. We will find out. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for me. I appreciate you. I got to go. I got to call it a day here and get ready for this afternoon. Y'all join me at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Please join me at 1 o'clock this afternoon because we'll get it done. All right? Whatever.
That's all I have. All right, then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be available. Mr. Peterson, I'm sure we'll hear from you or the Donaldsons once you obtain that document, and we'll sit down and talk.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Ed, I'll call you back in just a minute.
Yes, sir.